So in this video, we're going to go through an example of creating a frequency table and the corresponding histogram. So the data we're going to be using is from a sample of 1,000 pregnancies, and it can be downloaded in this file here. And what we're asked to do is create a frequency table and histogram using Excel. We're specifically focusing on just the birth weights data that's in our spreadsheet, and we're told to use our judgment to create the appropriate classes for that frequency table and histogram. So jumping over to Excel, this is what our data looks like. So the first column is the observation number, and we have 1,000 different pregnancies that data's been recorded for, and then these are all the variables that we have been interested in. So today for this video we're going to be interested in just the birth weight column. So the first step is to create our frequency table. So there's a few ways that this can be done, but the easiest way is to just create a pivot table. So as long as you have a cell highlighted within your data set here, if you go over to the Insert tab and click Pivot Table, it should bring us up a dialog box. So it asks us to select the range that our data sits within, and it's automatically defaulted to what we want. So it's starting from cell A1 up on the top left here and running to H1001. So we had 1,000 observations, which corresponds to the rows, plus we have the extra first row where all the titles are sitting, and H is the name of the column. If it doesn't default to this, you can always click and drag over the selection. You can also choose whether you want it to go in a new and an existing worksheet. I'm just going to go with new. So we click OK, and it's going to create us a pivot table, and now it's just a matter of filling it in. So we said that we were interested in the birth weights data. So to create our pivot table, we need to take birth weight and put it in the rows. And what it's done is, this is every single birth weight that we've got recorded on that other sheet. And I think it orders them by default into smallest to largest. So what we want is to figure out how many of each birth weight have been recorded. So that's what goes in the values here. And it's not quite what we want at the moment because it's sorted it based on each observation value. So we need to create classes so that we group them into similar ranges. So in order to do that, if you right click on this first column and select group, brings up a dialog box. So what it's telling us here is that currently, by default, the groups are going to start at 1,629, which is the smallest birth weight that we had. It's going to run up all the way to 5,214, which is going to be the largest one in this column. And it's going to sort them into groups of 1,000. So this might be what you're interested in, but most of the time you want to have nice round numbers for each of the groups. So I would suggest, let's say we go with 1,500 for the smallest value. You want to go smaller than the smallest observation so that you capture everything. And then here we want to go bigger than the biggest observation so we capture everything. So I might go with 5,500. And we'll just leave this as 1,000 for a moment. So if we click OK, what it's going to do is group them into those different classes. So we've got a class from 1,500 to 2,499 grams. We've got a class from 2,500 to 3,499 grams, and so on. So we've only got 4, but we can come back and fix that in a moment. What we'll do now is fix this second column. So by default, it is figuring out the sum of all the birth weights. So whatever observations were within this range, they're all being added together in this column, which is not quite what a frequency table should be. We just want to count up how many observations fitted within this range. So to change that, we can go down to the right-hand side here, click on the little arrow and go to Value Field Settings. And there's several different options in here, which are kind of common things that you might want to calculate about your data. So it's defaulted to sum. For a frequency table, we want it to change to count. So it's going to count up how many values sit within our classes. So if we hit OK, so now what this is telling us is that there's 33 observations within this range. There's 434 within this range, 495 in this range, and 38 in this range. So at the moment our data is quite compressed. We've only got those 4 classes. So let's say that we wanted to have a few more classes. We can go back into this grouping option, and rather than having them in 1000s for the ranges, maybe I can make it a bit smaller. So let's say I make it 500. So now it's adjusted our classes. So between 1500 and 1999, there's now 5 observations, and you can keep moving through. So if this was an assignment question, you might want to just make the formatting a little bit nicer for this frequency table. So rather than calling this row labels, in our case, this is the birth weights, and I'll put G for it being in grams. Make it a bit wider so you can see that. And rather than calling this the count of birth weight, this is the frequency that we were interested in. And then the grand total can just stay as it is. So that's pretty much it for creating a frequency table. So the next step that we were asked to do was to create a histogram. So in order to do that, again, there's a few different ways. I'm going to start by highlighting the data that I want to appear in my histogram, and you can go Insert. Now there is an option for a histogram in here. Alright, if you click on this option and click histogram, however, it tells you that this is not compatible with a pivot table. So the way to get around it, it's not too bad, is rather than inserting a histogram, we're going to insert it as a column or a bar chart. So I'll just pick the first one here. And really the only difference between a bar chart and a histogram is that a bar chart will have gaps between the bars, and a histogram doesn't. So in order to change that, it's quite simple. If you just click on the bars and right click and go into Format Data Series, brings up another set of options, and all you need to change is the gap width. So if you set this to 0, it's going to butt up all the bars against each other. It's only when it's bigger than 0 that you end up with a gap. So we want it to be butted up against each other because that's the histogram. And at the moment, by default, there's no lines between each of or outlining the different bars. So if you would like that, it's just a matter of going into the fill, the fill thing, and then border, and then you can change it. So by default, that's what it looks like. If you make it a solid line, and it's black in this case, what you should find is then you've got outlines around each of the bars. So that there is pretty much your histogram. If you want to make it a bit nicer, again, if it was like an assignment or something you were presenting to outside parties, might want to make the title more appropriate. So you could call it a histogram of birth weights. And then, yeah, it's a bit more obvious what we've got. So just to reiterate, this is the same as this, it's just presented in a different format. So for the range of 1500 to 1999, we've only got a very small bar because there was only 5 occurrences. However, for these other ones, say we take this one, 3500 to 3999 grams, there's quite a few observations, just under 350, which you can confirm here with the table 336. So that's all there is for this video in terms of creating a frequency table and a bar chart, histogram, and I'll see you in another video.